Minato Namikaze, the fourth and fastest Hokage and the most dominant shinobi in the world during his era. Though, despite this, many people hold the misconception that Minato's death match against Obito in the Nine Tails isn't all that impressive, when what Minato actually accomplished on the night known as the longest night in Konoha history is Herculean, to say the least. A large influence of promoting this misconception would be Obito's power at the age of just 17, where many people would underestimate him entirely. So what would happen if each Akatsuki duo battled Minato in Obito's place with the aid of not only the Nine Tails but also Minato's already accumulated fatigue and incentive to end the battle quickly, giving the Akatsuki duos an advantage they could certainly use. However, I think for basically half of the Akatsuki, it doesn't matter. We could discuss this along with a brief introduction to Minato's power, and I recently just did a video on Minato versus Hashirama, kind of going over why Minato's power and caliber of such is quite underestimated, and why he's more than in the discussion against even the strongest ninja to ever live. Upon Minato's introduction, despite not actually being shown in the manga, the chapter 238 synopsis statement hails Minato to possess unrivaled strength despite characters like Itachi Uchiha and the Sannin and even Hiruzen still being alive, which would be extremely consistent with several factors of how Minato is implied by Anko, Orochimaru's earliest disciple, stating in response to Hiruzen's fear of if he could actually fight Orochimaru now that he's likely much stronger, where Anko states that only if Minato were still here, and Hiruzen doesn't really seem to disagree that Minato would be able to do this and he couldn't. Hiruzen, though, even in this old state, is stated to either stand at the top of the shinobi world or the peak of the shinobi world through two separate objective medians, being the first fanbook, which Kabuto, one of the most notable undercover agents, actually corroborates, stating that they still challenged Hiruzen despite being aware of his reputation as the strongest of the 5 principal territories. However, when making such a claim, Kabuto would have to be basing this on the last time Hiruzen was known to engage in battle, which would actually be the Nine Tails attack here, where Hiruzen displayed half of the wrinkles from both the Orochimaru fight and his Edo Tensei reanimated state, from when he only had actually one more wrinkle than in his prime, which likely lends credence to how much stronger Hiruzen is during this time, which could also just be evidenced by why Hiruzen alone was confident in fighting the full Nine Tails during that attack. And this is something I brought up to my boy Sage to help with his Minato video, which I would recommend. It's very good. And it's that Hiruzen literally tells his designated Anbu guards to go protect and evacuate the citizens while he deals with Kurama. And while many people seem to not understand the true power of the complete Nine Tails, though with just half of it, Naruto was able to fully overpower the combined might of 6 Bijou bombs. With just the 6 tails of chakra of Kurama, of the half Kurama, Naruto was able to move equally to the invincible 6 paths of pain when in his Tendo state, though Hiruzen was fully confident in fighting in a much more prime state, along with the strongest of all animal summons, Enma. However, an even slightly younger Hiruzen stepped down from the title of Hokage for Minato, which would likely be fully power correlated, seeing as Hiruzen was stated to be one of the most beloved and politically favored Hokage, though following the Third Great Ninja War, Minato was chosen as Hokage, likely due to his power greatly exceeding nearly every Kage in history, as Hiruzen does rely on Minato through the Nine Tails attack, though he is the strongest of the 5 Kage, which would include both the third Kage and Raikage, who were both stated to be the strongest Kage of all time under that village, which Oniki would also follow a similar path, placing a run-on-sight order on Minato's head due to how he was numerously noted to be, bringing many weaker platoons of shinobi to victory through the Third Great Ninja War, where upon being Hokage, he would be praised among all shinobi as the greatest in godlike speed, impressing even the elites of the other villages, which would include the Kage and A, who was known as the Unruly A, which would be a title given only to that of the strongest in the village according to the 4th data book, when he also did fight and was blitzed by a much younger and weaker Minato, who verifiably would grow in power from his Yellow Flash days as a Jonin, as the 4th data book notes how A boasts a godlike speed not inferior to the Yellow Flash, and Minato is noted to be once again the greatest in godlike speed in that very book, placing Hokage Minato not only above A, who could rival the perfect Jinchuriki 8 Tails, but also his younger Jonin form, who in the Storm Generations game actually did beat Jiraiya and Hiruzen for the title of Hokage, supporting how Minato can be certainly placed above basically every Kage in history, though, kind of through Hiruzen, who could also react to Jubito in a very similar manner to Tobirama, who Minato would also outspeed to the battlefield, where Tobirama would utterly concede that Minato has faster body flicker than himself and is quick at striking too, implying a conjunction between those two speeds. This would be the same Tobirama who was capable of mentally reacting and combo attacking with even EMS Sasuke in KCM 1.5 Naruto, who actually could react to Madara and Obito's fire style and MS projectile attacks, and even one of Obito's surprise attacks from behind a little bit later. And I mean, bro, Minato is able to outspeed the 4 Hokage, who as a unit are stated to be the biggest of the big fish, and Minato is the fastest of them, which is just another avenue to place Minato relative to KCM 2 Naruto in power, which is supported by both Kakashi's vision of Minato being rather there, being there instead of, KCM 2 Naruto or whatever, and, Minato just also being able to combo together against Zetsu, who notes that they are persistent, which would only likely be possible if Minato and this Kakashi are relative. And I mean, Kakashi's fastest aspect being his Kamui perception, and the time to Kamui something away was able to be outsped by Minato's kunai and teleportation whilst in Sage mode, and that Kamui is faster than KCM 2 Naruto, and this Kakashi is also able to just keep up in hand-to-hand and actually outpace Obito during their hand-to-hand scuffle, who could beat up KCM 2 Naruto. So I mean, there's also like the entire narrative of Naruto needing to master the Nine Tails to fight an opponent Minato already beat, and yes, that is KCM 2, as it's actually stated by Kurama in the war that this is the form Minato intended for him to master. Coupled with Minato's ridiculous ceiling ninjutsu, Minato's speed becomes one of the most deadly things to ever encounter in a fight, as even Kurama noted at just the age of 15, after Minato was able to augment the tetragram seal in his own style, that he was actually a shinobi ranking alongside Hashirama, or a shinobi in the caliber of Hashirama's era, which would be in reference to the people who tried to subdue Kurama, which would just be Hashirama, Mito, Madara, which would also just kind of get supported later in some sense in the manga, where Minato, at the age of just 15 with a hole in his chest, was able to actually clash with a Bijou Bomb larger than the one stated to be capable of killing Orochimaru, the strongest Sannin, with his Rasengan, something literally built to battle both Bijou and Jinchuriki alike. However, again, it would be Minato's impressive ceiling that was deemed impressive by Kurama, and even ranks alongside Hashirama's, despite Hashirama actually sealing away tons of forbidden jutsu and seals in the Hokage scrolls, showing just how powerful Minato's ceiling would have to be. And even the perfect Jinchuriki Killer Bee seems to agree that Minato's tetragram is much more solid than even his own steel shell seal, which would likely be one of, if not the strongest seals in all of Kumo, seeing as how often Gyuki actually escaped and rampaged, killing its previous Jinchuriki, which even Shikaku, the notorious smartest alliance leader in the world, states upon seeing the flying thunder god guiding thunder that it has to be Minato. Like, do you guys realize how crazy this is? Like, I brought it up to Sage 2 in that discussion. We were both kind of laughing because it's like, bro, he was really like, nobody else, not Hiruzen, Kushina, Anbu Kakashi, any Jonin, nobody else could do this, but it has to be Minato. But yeah, I suppose now we can begin with our first groups, but to give them a little bit more of an advantage, I'm just going to combine these zombie and artistic duos with Orochimaru to, fight them at the same time, because otherwise they wouldn't stand much of a chance. And while such a group of fighters may seem like a lot, seeing as it's 5 Akatsuki members, I want you guys to understand that Minato's fighting style is extremely implied to be built to battle multiple opponents at once whilst alone. And he even developed a reputation of doing such during the Third Great Ninja War, where the Jonin platoon believed he could have taken out the entire enemy platoon in merely the blink of an eye after they threw the kunai, which was done through him ordering them to dash out multiple kunai in a strategy very similar to what he did against A and B, or simply just his Flash How dance, where Minato summons a clone to toss out 6 marked kunai, where he can just like throw them at multiple opponents. And if it shouldn't be obvious, Minato is also far faster than any opponent in this group, and the strongest of them would certainly be Orochimaru, who, despite being a running mate for the title of 4th Hokage, is clearly inferior, as when Hiruzen believed that on the basis of Orochimaru training for several years, with his talent already surpassing Hiruzen Hiruzen's knowledge, he couldn't beat him. Though Anko, his student, Orochimaru's literal student, believed that Minato certainly could, which would also just fit with all the implications for his lore scaling above both Hiruzen and Jiraiya, who was literally a Sannin alongside Orochimaru, and agreed with Tsunade that Minato was an unparalleled talent, despite being Orochimaru's teammate. So yeah, Orochimaru's only real talking points to ever substantiate him being even relative to Minato are both simply wrong, being how Minato is supposedly a sub-Sage Mode level fighter, and Orochimaru isn't, due to how Suigetsu states that with Sasuke, at the peak of his MS, finally surpassed Orochimaru, and I guess the latter would just be how B supposedly implies that Sasuke is stronger than Minato in his Take days or something. Beginning with the former, the translation for Suigetsu noting that would actually be more accurately translated to something along the lines of, it's no longer Orochimaru's era, or it's our era. Basically just implying that Orochimaru doesn't need to return because it's no longer his era. That it's not that he's simply too strong for EMS Sasuke, or the MS Sasuke who's comparable to Sage Mode Naruto, who is stated to have surpassed Jiraiya in terms of power through both Fukasaku's implications during the Mount Myoboku training and the Volume 45 back cover, which would be consistent with how Naruto performs much better against pain than Sage Mode Jiraiya, which is a form of Jiraiya that's stated to actually surpass the Sannin according to himself. And considering Orochimaru is implied to be equals with Jiraiya on numerous occasions, this would have to at least mean that Sage Naruto is stronger than Orochimaru, whether you believe he's equals to base Jiraiya or Sage Jiraiya. Which Fukasaku also states that Naruto surpassed his predecessors, which he also likely would have been referring to Hokage Minato, seeing as Naruto's scrolls, or his Toad Scrolls, reads 4th Hokage rather than Minato, though he could have had summons prior to obtaining Sage Mode, and either way the data book, in reference to this point in the sequence, states that Naruto has a Sage Mode exceeding Jiraiya's as well, which would likely just be in reference to its abilities and overall Senjutsu mastery, and Minato would be in the same, which would align with how he himself states that calling Sage Mode not his forte would be an understatement. And I mean, he literally only managed one attack with it, so no wonder he said that. But regardless, this image isn't from Fukasaku, but rather Tsunade, and there's simply no way to determine what this is in reference to, and assuming it's power and not just her seeing Naruto in the way that she used to see how, Minato and Jiraiya would protect the village, would be simply some arbitrary assumption. And if Sage Naruto is actually stronger than Minato, it would just get contradicted within the next 15 chapters, as Minato states that Naruto needs to master the Nine Tails and gain new power to beat the mastermind above Pain, who Minato himself has already beaten. So, I mean, there's not a single point in this link where it looks good for Orochimaru, and it doesn't get any better with the latter method through Killer B, and they basically just run with how B states that Sasuke is probably the toughest opponent he's ever fought. And while I wouldn't expect some fans to read context like they probably need to, it's fine. That's why I'm here, to point out the obvious. But this is likely just talking about the Raikage as well, as it does note 2 people, and B just previously stated that Sasuke along with A are the only 2 people to dodge his charge, and it's also just mistranslated as I hinted at a second ago and corrected in the anime where it states that Sasuke is one of the 2 toughest people he's ever fought, which leaves room for both the Raikage or Jonin Minato. But yeah, if it isn't clear, the methods for getting even the strongest of this group above Minato are simply bad. Minato's Rasengan at the age of just 15 already has qualifications for outputting more energy than the Bijou Bomb from the Four Tails Naruto that Orochimaru stated would kill him, and this is likely more telling than what you'd think, seeing as Orochimaru just regenerated from having his stomach sliced in half and his arm ripped off, though he believes that this level of force is simply too much, implying that it might just vaporize him or something. And to be fair, the Rasengan was literally created to battle Bijou and Jinchuriki alike, and Minato was faster and able to outpace the full Nine Tails, and Orochimaru was pressed by the Four Tails of half of the Nine Tails, similarly to Jiraiya, who also believed that he was a match for Old Man Hiruzen, who was every bit of a match for Orochimaru, with the data book stating that they are equals, and of course Minato skills above a much younger Hiruzen, so saying a Rasengan or 2 wouldn't put him down is likely just really disingenuous and simply doesn't even matter, as Orochimaru is nowhere near Minato's level and speed. Orochimaru was relative to Hiruzen and Minato was above each Hokage, so while I would concede that out of the bottom half of the Akatsuki, Orochimaru might present an issue with his intellect and wide variety of jutsu, his support is lackluster in comparison, to say the least. Deidara, Sasori, Kakuzu, and Hidan all scale virtually below even Heavy Sasuke in terms of speed, and I mean, while there are arguments placing Heavy Sasuke near KCM1 levels of speed, it's quite lacking in context, with things like how Suigetsu is actually extremely tired in the instance where Sasuke blitzes him, and they fight B, which makes him stronger, and then upon actually intercepting the Raikage or whatever, it's only noted after that chapter that the Raikage gets serious through the weekly release statements, which there is a lot more for those who are curious, and if you are, I would recommend my Sasuke vs. Pain video, shameless plug, as these points really do get hammered there. But regardless, it's quite clear that Minato would put Sasuke on a leash due to how Minato is simply much faster than Obito, who is a rival to a healthy young Itachi who, while sick and nearly blind just prior to his heart attack, was actually capable of perception blitzing Heavy Sasuke during their shuriken clash. And though I think many Naruto speed gaps are overestimated, this one is simply one of those cases where it's not, where Minato is perception blitzing Heavy Sasuke, but regardless, it's quite clear that Heavy Sasuke is above these lower tier Akatsuki members through the narrative of things like how each of the Team 7 members had an opposing Akatsuki member to go along with it. And despite Naruto beating Kakuzu and being considered relative to Kakashi, who fully kept pace with Kakuzu, was still feeling totally inferior to Heavy Sasuke, who was also able to perception blitz both Naruto and Sakura the last times they interacted, which would include Sakura as well, who actually could perceive every attack Sasori utilized and even countered many of them, despite noting that he wanted her to die. And we know that Heavy Sasuke was already able to fully blitz Deidara's combat speed from 2 separate occasions, to the point where once he nearly did it the second time, Deidara immediately decided to not even let him get any closer and simply fly around with his tracker bombs and landmines being in play. And while I would concede that if Minato weren't such a go for the kill character with such a ridiculous speed advantage in these characters, then there really could be some really devastating combinations that could be granted to the Akatsuki, like an Iron Sand Clay Dragon, or maybe Kakuzu's hearts dropping Deidara's bombs or something. However, again, Minato's initiative to begin his fights via a full blitz is nearly always, such as how he does it against the Iwanin to save Kakashi, he does against Obito, and B implies that it's a common strategy to do with how the Yellow Flash is first at bat, quite a smash, and if it's not this strategy, it's potentially even worse, being the strategy I mentioned earlier with how Minato could toss out several marked kunai to then just blitz around and kill them all. And since he's also protecting the village and is on a timer, what is there to say? Kakashi was able to react to every one of Kakuzu's hearts and attacks, and was simply overpowered and forced to use his more potent methods of attack, like his double Raikiri, to counter the lightning heart and whatnot. But again, Kakashi reacts to every single one, and it's quite clear that Hokage Minato, who can blitz the Hokage to the battlefield and is comparable to the Naruto after he masters the Nine Tails, not this one with slits in his eyes, it's quite clear how this fight would go. And I do apologize for those who wanted to hear an out of character explanation for Minato letting them get their attacks off and whatnot to then fight accordingly. It just can't happen. This is simply not how he fights, and the speed disparity is nearly impossible to bridge for this group, and you can likely see why I put them all together now. Which leads us into our next team and first duo, actually, being Itachi and Kisame, who unironically do marginally better than the previous group, though I still think there are many things questionable for this battle. However, in this case, I actually think it's worth the discussion rather than Kakuzu and Sasori versus the 4th Hokage. And while sick, Itachi is quite impressive, being able to again perception blitz Heavy Sasuke, who beat even Deidara, a member implied to be stronger than Kakuzu by Kisame. It's still not close to Minato, who was actually able to beat the strongest Uchiha since Madara, Obito. However, a case for Itachi also being able to beat Obito is there to be made, and while I don't personally take it that far, I think their entire novel interaction and later statements by Obito are really impressive and telling for Itachi's power, when they likely shouldn't come to a surprise. Itachi, before ever gaining the Mangekyo Sharingan, he was actually stated to possess abilities outstanding compared to the rest of his clan by the anime profile guides, cards, which also mentions many notes of how the Uchiha clan are not only the strongest clan in Konoha, and which is the strongest village, but are also just synonymous with societal peace. And this would just be consistent with how the novel would actually note how a younger Itachi makes note that he had finally reached a point of a fireball size that only Shisui and his father could achieve, which would likely be strength indicative overall, seeing as this anime profile guide's book also states that the fireball jutsu is kind of what defines an Uchiha shinobi and puts them to be a full-fledged shinobi, and without it, it is impossible, implying that the size that Itachi gloats is likely implying that Itachi is already of the strongest of the clan, which would be stated to be outstanding in comparison to later, which would already begin to place Itachi near the absolute peak of the shinobi world, which may give rise to an explanation of how Itachi, following the death of Tenma, was at one point so scared of Obito and his pressure that he couldn't even move due to him trying to just simply process the phenomenon of Obito's body, whereas later Itachi would cut straight through Obito's arrogant attitude with forcefulness that even shocked Obito, where he would declare that he would kill Obito, implying that it's not a matter of if, but potentially when, where they simply acknowledge each other as opponents, and keeping this pact, one if broken, would result in Itachi supposedly killing Obito. Obito never touched Konoha due to this, and even stated in his head to Sasuke after the surprise of Amaterasu that if Itachi knew everything about him, he'd be dead, which could be Obito conceding that Itachi could kill him via unknown means. And if you consider the Naruto Road to Ninja movie canon, maybe you think, Kishimoto's name in the credits or the fact that Kishimoto wrote a short manga for it is enough to say it is. Itachi actually implies that he could kill Obito without physical means, where the camera then zooms in on his left eye, which would be Tsukiyomi, implying that Tsukiyomi, which isn't physical, might actually be able to work against someone like Minato, who literally stares directly into Obito's eyes the entire fight in a similar fashion to how Killer Bee did to Sasuke until the MS came out. However, I think any basic genjutsu shouldn't really be allowed, seeing as Obito didn't likely do it because he couldn't, since he was controlling the complete Nine Tails, and Itachi might not even be able to, as the third data book notes that nobody can, but for the sake of discussion we can allow it, and Tsukiyomi as well, since that's one of his main abilities, along with the Amaterasu, which is stated by Zetsu to be both impossible to dodge and the strongest physical attack. Though I suppose Minato has basically, counters to both of these in the Flying Thunder God, which is stated to ignore the concepts of space and distance, with it actually opening a subspace through space and time to then transport yourself or an object through a much smaller distance. And for example, if Minato were to be hit with Tsukiyomi, the chakra has to be placed in his senses to disrupt him, and Kakashi seems to be cognizant through his entire time under Tsukiyomi, meaning that Minato might be able to simply teleport out, which would lead him through a subspace, which would be essentially something like this. Imagine you have two dots on opposing sides of a piece of paper. These dots are the markers. Instead of Minato traveling fully across the paper, Minato simply opens the seal and folds the paper over to be a much closer distance to travel, and that distance would be the subspace of sorts. So Minato could likely sever the chakra tie over an infinite distance, but though if you really want to be generous to Itachi, then you could always argue that the chakra might be able to cover that distance, as Naruto's chakra and Kawaki's arm kind of do a similar thing. Or you could just argue that Kakashi was only cognizant in the manner that he was because Itachi was holding back or something, and in that case, then Itachi does have a really good win con against Minato. However, outside of his genjutsu clashes with Sasuke, Itachi commonly utilizes the Amaterasu instead, which, as he used it to instantly burn Yagura after the fireball, which forced him into V2 to use Biju bombs, and yes, if Amaterasu hit Minato, it would kill him, but it's not likely going to ever touch him, which isn't anything to really dunk on Itachi, as I actually think in terms of pure physical stats, he actually has one of the best cases for any Akatsuki member, if not the best, to fight Minato here, due to how Itachi's illness is seemingly an autoimmune disease, like potentially microscopic polyangiitis or HIV, coupling this with Itachi standing out in the rain for no reason, with Kisame noting how he'll get sick, then you might actually have an explanation for why Itachi went from beating up Kakashi in just the 3 Tomoe with only 30% of his chakra using fireballs, genjutsu, you name it, to having a heart attack in the middle of battle whilst blind, and that's just because Itachi was clearly draining himself for no reason via things like a several panel drag shot of Amaterasu that some people actually interpret as 3 Amaterasu, and just walking around with his Usagi Susanoo, which he held up until he dropped dead against Sasuke, who he outlasted. So, no, this is a bit tangential, but I knew someone was going to say, stamina though, or whatever. However, back to my point, seeing as Itachi changes so drastically in, 3 months, and isn't blind when brought back at Edo like how he was when he battled Orochimaru, where his cataracts were so impaired that protein accumulation on the islands was impossible. And he was literally blind, hence to why he stated that he felt the Hydra rather than he sees the Hydra. It's likely just safe to say that Itachi's Edo Tensei state or variant is just some variant slightly before his fight with Sasuke, and I'm not saying that Edo Itachi is a worse fighter than Alive Itachi, as that's not true, but I wouldn't really see no reason for Itachi's physical feats against Nagato, B, KCM1 Naruto to be invalid, seeing as Sasuke is stated to actually surpass Itachi in EMS, and the Edo Tensei perfectly replicates the Alive variants it's actually being drawn from, like how Hiruzen's Edo copied the amount of dead pigment cells on his face for his hair color, and Hashirama still has his cells that are his Hashirama cells or whatever, so Itachi likely has his as well, and he also does have blood, meaning that feats such as Itachi parrying off KCM1 Naruto in just his 3 Tomoe are certainly valid, along with his fight with B, where he actually blitzed him completely by jumping back 3 times, leaving B statue during his attack, which he then parried off over 10 different sword strikes from the 8 sword style, which are actually very implied to be applicable to Itachi and his alive state. If you want to take it a little further though, then you could take feats of Itachi blitzing Nagato, who could blitz both B and Naruto at the same time, whilst Itachi was suppressing his Susanoo. I mean, it literally has less fingers, where he actually was able to blitz him, and is kind of implying a blitz level difference between him and KCM1 Naruto. However, while Minato is much faster than KCM1 Naruto as well, and is likely much more comparable to KCM 1.5 Naruto, who is pacing relatively to EMS Sasuke, who surpassed Itachi, meaning that Minato still has a notable advantage going into the fight. Itachi should also still be able to react to his basic levels of combat speed, like a Rasengan charge and what have you, which could also be, aided by Kisame. And while Kisame's feats are actually really impressive, I think the B fight is by far too ambiguous in certain things, and that the Guy encounter is really telling for Kisame, and where he, not even at full power, was actually able to overpower a base Guy with a miniature shark bomb, and then later match a 7th gate Guy's combat speed underwater, despite being a more dense median, as Guy's 7th gate aura actually pushes water away from him. However, may I mind you that these 7 swordsmen are implied to be at half power without their blade, which could just be more true for Kisame more than the others at least, seeing as, well, Samehada is sentient and totally could completely duck under and outspeed V1 Killer B to duck under his attack and swipe up to then absorb these 6 tails at the same time, and this actually shouldn't be anything above Kisame's pay grade either, seeing as Sasuke notes that, the weapons are only really as strong as you make them. Meaning that if Minato uses any large-scale jutsu or even a Rasengan, there's a chance that Kisame might just be able to absorb it if he manages to catch it when Minato isn't focused on him, for example, which could also just be aided telling if, Kisame just kind of floods the battlefield or the forest and creates a bubble where Minato could then just teleport out of, as he does have a seal in, 2 other spots in the village plus Kushina's stomach, meaning that Minato also just has full counters to basically all of Kisame's arsenal. However, coupled with this impressive ability of Itachi's, this battle becomes quite interesting. However, could they bridge the physical gap between the duo and Minato in regards to speed? And I mean, this would be a gap that the 3rd data book notes how Naruto was the only person capable of surpassing Minato, which would include both Itachi and Kisame in that statement. If you want simply more supplementary material through our scaling for both of them prior, it should still be enough, coupled with how Minato is faster than Obito, who Itachi was a rival to at full power, and they kind of run at the same pace, whatever. It's still quite clear that no matter what, Minato had to simply test the Kamui abilities, as it's a space-time ninjutsu literally more impressive than the Flying Thunder God, to where Minato wins the Battle of Speed according to the weekly release chapter synopsis statement for chapter 502, which would be evidenced by how Minato quite literally did blitz Obito with the FTG whilst holding back, seeing as during the subspace, Minato had to fully rotate his body to then slam the Rasengan to then come out of the, FTG space, right? Which kind of would be consistent, or a consistent way to say that Minato packs up Kisame or even Itachi, as Minato can attack whilst in the subspace, such as how he kind of exit the subspace against Obito when in KCM2, where after fully slicing through him, he then realized who he actually sliced, which would be something likely to happen, as Minato does try to place a mark on his opponents and does try to end the fight as quickly as possible, and he has an incentive for that here to end it quickly. Meaning that, like, Kisame likely only stays in this game if Minato doesn't kill him immediately, though he likely should, as he has blitz level abilities to do such. Which, despite Itachi's impressive physical performance that he could actually put up, his best and most confident way of winning here would just be through the Susanoo, which is also just faster than himself. So, for example, where you have MS Itachi's speed at, just raise that bar higher, as Itachi, like Sasuke by the end of the summit, has every evolution of the basic Susanoo or MS, which is quite telling, seeing as Sasuke with precog was able to move equally to like V1 Raikage, like, and whatnot, and is able to completely outspeed him once he uses the Susanoo and drags himself out of the crater with its arm, which he was also able to form faster than any aspect of his combat speed other than his perception against the Raikage. And considering Itachi's Susanoo is simply more experienced and possesses the legendary spirit weapons, I think it's safe to also say that it's faster than Itachi's combat speed, begging the question of how does Minato deal with it? Though, before answering that, I think it should be clear that the Susanoo has nothing to catch Minato, so it's simply, could Minato deal with it with his abilities, or would he simply just have to out stamina Itachi despite being on the time limit? And to answer that, I think both the Yodamir and Totsuka Blade individually are beyond what Minato could deal with. The Yodamir is stated to repel any oncoming attack by matching the exact properties and nulling it, which combined with the ethereal and weightless Totsuka Blade, Itachi is basically, he's kind of invincible, right? Or, well, is he? Well, probably not, in part to how the rest of the Susanoo functions, being stated to simply be chakra in the third data book, meaning that via the flying thunder god that surpasses the concepts of space and distance, Minato could get through the chakra piece of the Susanoo regardless of how you interpret the Yodamir being omnidirectional or not, considering the Bijou Bomb is just an extremely dense piece of chakra and it can pass through a subspace. I think the Susanoo likely could as well. However, this doesn't mean that Itachi would just get teleported off or away, and what I mean is Itachi actually can act autonomously from his Susanoo, as shown from when he actually walks in front of it against Sasuke, when he bombs the Chibaku Tensei, and after he seals Nagato, where he simply just continues to seal Nagato while he just exits and talks to Naruto, which Madara can also do the same thing, so it is just pretty consistent. However, we seem to know that they can just detach to the Susanoo like how Madara did, but he also just kind of doesn't sometimes, like how Madara did when he got hit with the Hirudora against Guy. So it's almost just up to whether Itachi is willing to release it from himself or not, and if he doesn't, then, well, he just gets teleported very far away and is out of the battle. And if he does just get it teleported away from him and he still stays in the battle, then Minato just gets a mark or simply slices his throat with his superior speed. Another interpretation I've heard is how Minato could simply seal Itachi's eyes away, or at least the ocular nerve that the chakra is flowing through, and hence maybe seal the Sharingan alone, which could be done, though it's kind of ambiguous. While Kushina does state that she taught Minato several sealing jutsus, it's still unknown if Minato actually has one in specific that could do something, though they do exist, as Sasuke's eyes get sealed while he's in prison following the war, and Danzo's arm sheath likely has something to do of that sort, to constantly just not drain him, potentially an internal seal that's suppressing the ocular chakra, hence to why it's, kind of had to be removed for the Izanagi to work, though the Izanagi does work if it's hidden, like with Obito. So it's definitely something possible for Minato. However, it's not necessary, and he could still, more than likely would actually just slice his throat after removing the Susanoo. And if for whatever reason you believe that Kisame stayed alive, then the situation would be kind of similar to how Itachi was protecting Sasuke with his Susanoo against Kabuto, and now that it's gone, Minato could also just murder him as well. So while I do think this match can be a really good fight, especially more so in this situation, I think Minato certainly takes it with more times than not, as Itachi's only real win con being his Tsukiyomi surprise attack, if again you only really subscribe to certain arguments in relation to that. Following that, we have the 6 paths of pain and the leader of the Akatsuki, who actually has a disadvantage in this situation compared to someone like Itachi, as well. Konan doesn't really do anything, and if it isn't clear, Konan is basically featless outside of her showings against Obito, where he wasn't really going all out, and she had prepared for years with an entire ocean of over 600 billion paper bombs to explode for twice his passive, Kamui ability, timer and whatnot. And when Jiraiya not only blistered and countered her with Todo, but also with his hair right after, wrapping around her and subduing her, likely also being aided by her mental nerf. So let me ask you this: if she wasn't nerfed or whatever, could she just beat up Jiraiya? No? Okay. So her B rank paper techniques aren't going to be able to be just activated at a near speed fast enough to where she would not get utterly destroyed by Minato, who's massively above the Sannin tier when she's probably not. However, Pain also just is above the Sannin as well, seeing as Pain is literally stated to possess power beyond even Sage Naruto, who was stated during the training at Mount Miyaboku and during the Pain fight to exceed Sage Jiraiya in both Senjutsu ability and physical power, which would also just align very consistently with how the Animal Path alone was able to react fully to Jiraiya's fastest attack in Sage mode, being the Kabari Senbon, being a feat to also just negate the Animal Path being blitzed by Jiraiya's combat speed, which was clearly due to it being in the middle of weaving signs and falling from the ceiling, showing how Pain, even in the individual paths and not quite at full power, are not only faster but also stronger. The Preta Path was able to completely catch Jiraiya's strongest attack, being the Big Baller Sengon, and hold it briefly before absorbing it. The Ashura Path literally ripped Jiraiya's arm off, and the Human Path is able to catch a Sage mode punch from behind the back with his eyes closed. So Pain is really stronger, and I mean, this is the same Pain who's considered to be invincible in comparison to fighters who actually could oppose him up until chapter 402, which is just really telling for his power though. Despite the divine level of power for Pain, Minato, still witnessing the entire fight from Naruto against him, stated to Naruto in regards to Obito that he is, quote, quite a formidable shinobi, someone you need extraordinary strength to stand against and hope to have any chance of defeating, which would actually just imply that with the power that rivaled Pain, it doesn't even come close to, or at least isn't near the level that he would need to beat an opponent that Minato already beat and throttled, who possibly could have been stronger during the Ninetales attack, since Minato blows Obito's arm off and it falls off in the same Zetsu-like fashion, despite it being the wrong arm, implying he was more amped or whatever. However, this is just an interpretation, and I do believe Orange Mask Obito is closer, but not near the difference great enough to gauge that gap between how much greater he is than Pain, coupled with how much faster Minato is than Obito, meaning that this just gives Minato a massive physical advantage. And one of the other unfortunate disadvantages I noted from the beginning would be how Pain's 6 paths, fight style, which would be totally countered by Minato's flash out dance or kunai throws, where he just tosses several at once just by slicing through them all, meaning that anybody, any of the paths abilities aren't really going to actually be pulled off. And it's actually implied that Kakashi with his Raikiri and whatnot was able to press Pain to a point where he felt that he needed to instantly kill Kakashi, and Minato, whilst weakened and an Edo, is implied to actually combo attack with a late War Art Kakashi, who was able to keep up with White Mask Obito in combat speed prior. And this is simply just another method for this skilloid, as there isn't really anything to say for Pain. It's just a really bad matchup. But yeah, that's the video. If you guys did enjoy, then please consider liking and subscribing, as it helps me out, and I guess helps the channel out as well a ton, and helps me keep putting out content like this for you guys. So what did you guys think? Did you guys think it was a stomp for every match, or maybe the opposite? Either way, let me know. And as always, God bless you guys. Love you guys. I'm going to bed.